The gavel fell with a hollow thud that seemed to echo through the dusty livestock barn, sealing the fate of the sickly mare for exactly $1. Most of the crowd had already turned away, their attention shifting to healthier prospects. But Garrett Thorne remained frozen in place, his weathered hands still raised from the winning bid. The auctioneer's voice cracked with barely concealed disdain as he announced the sale, and scattered laughter rippled through the assembly of ranchers and horse traders. "Congratulations," Thorne muttered. Wade Kellerman, the neighboring rancher, whose own bid had stopped at 50 cents. "You just bought yourself a one-way ticket to the glue factory." Garrett ignored the jest, his steel-gray eyes fixed on the trembling chestnut mare in the corner pan. Where others saw lost cause ribs showing through a dull coat, head hanging low, favoring her left front leg, Garrett saw something entirely different. The way she held her ears, still alert despite her obvious pain, the intelligence that flickered in her dark eyes when she looked directly at him. Most telling of all, the careful way she positioned herself to protect her swollen belly. She was pregnant. The revelation had struck him like lightning 20 minutes earlier when he'd noticed the subtle signs that escaped everyone else's attention. The slightly rounded flanks, the protective stance, the way she'd shifted her weight when another horse had approached too aggressively. Garrett had spent 43 years raising horses on his family's ranch, and he knew the signs of a mare in full as well as he knew the lines on his own face. "You're making a mistake," called out Vivian Ashworth, the estate administrator who'd been liquidating the deceased owner's livestock. "That mare hasn't been eating properly in weeks. Dr. Pemberton examined her yesterday and recommended immediate disposal." Garrett finally moved, his boots scuffing against the barn floor as he approached the pen. The mare's head lifted slightly, nostrils flaring as she caught his scent. For a moment, their eyes met across the wooden rails, and Garrett felt that familiar spark of connection that had guided him through decades of horse breeding. "Sometimes," he said quietly, more to himself than to the dispersing crowd, "what looks like sickness is really just a body working harder than usual." The administrative paperwork took 15 minutes to complete, during which time Garrett endured a steady stream of advice, warnings, and outright mockery. Chester Millbrook, a trader from the counties over, clapped him on the shoulder with false sympathy. "Hope you got a good veterinarian on speed dial, Thorne. That horse won't last the week." But Garrett had already made his assessment. The mare's condition wasn't as dire as it appeared. Malnourishment, certainly. Possible neglect in the final weeks of the previous owner's life. But beneath the surface symptoms, he recognized the signs of a fundamentally sound animal whose body was simply prioritizing the life growing within her over her own immediate comfort. As he loaded the mare into his trailer with infinite patience, speaking in low, reassuring tones, Garrett couldn't shake the feeling that this dollar purchase might prove to be the most valuable investment of his career. The mare stepped carefully up the ramp, her trust in him already beginning to form, and settled into the trailer with a soft whicker that sounded almost like gratitude. The drive back to Copper Creek Ranch took 35 minutes, during which Garrett found himself talking to his new acquisition through the trailer's speaking window, sharing his plans for her recovery and his growing excitement about the foal she carried. By the time they reached his property, the late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the pastures, and Garrett Thorne was already planning the next chapter in what he suspected would be an extraordinary story. Dr. Marlena Reeves arrived at Copper Creek Ranch just as the morning mist was lifting from the valley, her veterinary truck kicking up dust clouds along the gravel driveway. She'd known Garrett Thorne for 15 years, had seen him make unconventional decisions before, but his midnight phone call had surprised even her. "A dollar horse that nobody else wanted?" she'd asked, pulling on her boots in the pre-dawn darkness. "Garrett, what aren't you telling me?" Now, standing beside the quarantine stall where the chestnut mare stood quietly munching hay, Marlena understood exactly what had driven her old friend to make such an impulsive purchase. Her experienced hands moved methodically over the horse's frame, checking vital signs, examining the subtle swelling that confirmed Garrett's suspicions. "She's definitely in foal," Marlena confirmed, her stethoscope pressed against the mare's flank. "About 7 months along, I'd estimate. And you're right about the malnutrition being the primary issue." The mare stood patiently throughout the examination, as if she understood that these gentle hands meant help rather than harm. Her coat, though still dull, showed the first signs of improvement after just 12 hours of proper feed and clean water. More importantly, her eyes had regained some of their alertness, tracking Marlena's movements with growing confidence. "What about the previous owner's veterinarian?" Marlena asked, drawing blood samples for testing. "That Dr. Pemberton character?" Garrett's expression darkened. "Spoke to him this morning. Turns out he never actually examined her beyond a cursory glance. Made his recommendation based on her appearance and the administrator's desire to clear the property. Why quickly? The blood work would take 24 hours to process. But Marlena's physical examination revealed a mare who was fundamentally healthy. Despite her current condition, her heart rate was steady, her breathing clear, and most encouragingly, the foal's heartbeat was strong and regular. "I've seen this before," Marlena explained, updating her charts. "When a pregnant mare doesn't get adequate nutrition, her body automatically diverts resources to the developing foal. She'll sacrifice her own condition to ensure the pregnancy continues successfully." Over the following days, Garrett implemented a carefully structured recovery program. The mare, whom he'd begun calling Copper after the ranch's name, received small, frequent meals of high-quality hay supplemented with specialized grain for pregnant mares. Fresh water was always available, and Garrett had installed a heat lamp in her stall to combat the lingering chill of early spring. But the most crucial element of Copper's recovery wasn't medical, it was emotional. Garrett spent hours each day simply sitting in her stall, sometimes reading aloud from horse breeding journals, other times working on ranch paperwork while she grazed nearby. Slowly, methodically, he rebuilt her trust in human companionship. The transformation was remarkable. Within a week, Copper's ribs were less prominent. Her coat had begun to regain its natural luster, and most importantly, her personality started to emerge. She nickered softly when Garrett approached, had begun investigating his pockets for treats, and showed increasing curiosity about the other horses in adjacent pastures. "She's got excellent conformation," Marlena observed during her follow-up visit. "Strong hindquarters, good bone structure, intelligent head. Somebody paid serious money for this mare originally." Garrett nodded, running his hand along Copper's neck, then wondering about her background. The estate sale paperwork just listed her as chestnut mare, age unknown. But everything about her suggests quality breeding. The mystery deepened when Garrett discovered a small, faded frieze brand on Copper's shoulder, a registration mark that indicated she'd once belonged to a recognized breeding program. His research into the brand's origin would have to wait, however, because more pressing concerns demanded his attention. Copper was approaching her final trimester, and the foal's positioning suggested a potentially complicated delivery. Marlena had scheduled weekly checkups for the remainder of the pregnancy, but she'd also warned Garrett to watch for signs of premature labor. "That dollar you spent might end up being the bargain of the century," she told him as she packed her equipment, "but only if we can get both mother and foal through the birth safely." As Marlena's truck disappeared down the driveway, Garrett stood beside Copper's stall, watching her graze contentedly in the afternoon sunshine. The mare, who'd been discarded as worthless, was already proving her critics wrong. But Garrett suspected their real vindication lay still ahead in the foal she carried, and the bloodlines that would soon be revealed. The frieze brand on Copper's shoulder led Garrett down a rabbit hole of research that consumed his evenings. For the better part of 2 weeks, the mark, a distinctive combination of letters and numbers, had been partially obscured by years of hair growth, but under the right lighting, it was clearly visible. WD followed by what appeared to be 347. After numerous phone calls to breed registries and former contacts in the horse industry, Garrett finally connected with Dolores Hendricks, a retired secretary from the now-defunct Windermere Downs breeding operation. Her voice crackled with excitement when he described the brand. "WD3 for 7, she repeated slowly. "Lord Almighty, that would be Autumn's promise. She was one of our foundation mares, bred from some of the finest bloodlines in the country. But that was, must be 8 years ago now." Garrett's pulse quickened. What happened to Windermere Downs? financial troubles hit in 2017. Dolores explained. The owner, Morris Windermere, had to liquidate everything. Most of the horses went to established breeders, but some of the pregnant mares were sold to smaller operations. I remember Autumn's Promise specifically because she was carrying a foal by our champion stallion, Midnight's Legacy. The revelation sent Garrett's mind reeling. Midnight's Legacy had been a legendary sire whose offspring regularly commanded six-figure prices. If Copper was indeed Autumn's Promise, her current foal represented bloodlines worth potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, but Dolores had more information. After the dispersal sale, I heard rumors that Autumn's Promise had been sold to a small ranch in Colorado. The owner was elderly, kept to himself. Name was Hendricks. Walter Hendricks. The pieces clicked into place. Walter Hendricks had been the deceased owner whose estate had liquidated Copper at the auction. Garrett realized he'd unknowingly purchased a horse whose true value had been hidden by neglect and circumstance. Is there any way to verify her identity? Garrett asked. DNA testing, Dolores replied immediately. I still have hair samples from all our breeding stock. Windermere Downs was meticulous about documentation. If you can get a sample from your mare, I can arrange for comparison testing. The DNA collection was simple enough, but the wait for results stretched Garrett's patience thin. Meanwhile, Copper continued her remarkable recovery. Her weight had stabilized. Her coat now gleamed with health, and her pregnancy was progressing. Normally, Marlena's weekly visits had become routine checkups rather than emergency consultations. During one particularly warm afternoon, Garrett was brushing Copper in the pasture when he noticed something that made his heart skip. The mare's head lifted suddenly, ears pricked forward, and she released a low, rumbling call that Garrett had never heard before. From the nearby stallion pasture came an answering call, and Garrett watched in fascination as Copper moved toward the fence with newfound energy and purpose. She's remembering who she is, he murmured to himself. The DNA results arrived on a Tuesday morning via overnight delivery. Garrett's hands trembled slightly as he opened the envelope, knowing that the contents would either confirm his suspicions or reveal an elaborate coincidence. The laboratory report was definitive. The mare in his pasture was indeed Autumn's Promise, daughter of champions, carrying a foal whose lineage traced back to some of the most prestigious bloodlines in American horse breeding. But the implications extended far beyond financial value. Walter Hendricks had apparently acquired Autumn's Promise during her prime breeding years, then gradually isolated her as his own health declined. The mare's deteriorating condition hadn't been the result of any inherent weakness. It had been the inevitable consequence of an aging owner's inability to provide proper care. That evening, Garrett called Dolores with the news. Her reaction was immediate and emotional. "Thank God," she whispered. "We all wondered what happened to her after the dispersal. Maurice would be so relieved to know she's in good hands." The conversation revealed another crucial detail. Autumn's Promise had been bred to Midnight's Legacy shortly before the Windermere Downs closure. If the timing was correct, the foal she now carried would be the final offspring of that legendary stallion, making it potentially the most valuable horse on Garrett's ranch. As he stood in Copper's stall that night, watching her rest peacefully, Garrett marveled at the chain of events that had brought them together. A neglected mare, a hasty auction, a $1 bid, and now the promise of bloodlines that could transform his modest breeding operation into something extraordinary. The foal was due within the month, and Garrett knew that everything he'd worked for during his 43 years with horses was about to culminate in the birth of a single, remarkable animal. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a rain-soaked Thursday in late April. Garrett had been monitoring Copper closely for signs of impending labor, but the mare had chosen the darkest hour of the night to begin the process that would bring her foal into the world. He found her in the large foaling stall, pacing restlessly and occasionally pawing at the thick bed of straw. Her breathing was labored, and perspiration darkened her coat despite the cool night air. Garrett's decades of experience told him they were still in the early stages, but he immediately called Dr. Reeves. "How's she doing?" Marlena's voice was alert despite the early hour, restless, sweating, but nothing dramatic yet, Garrett reported. His phone pressed to his ear while he observed Copper's movements. "I'd estimate we're still a few hours away. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't leave her alone." Garrett had no intention of leaving. He'd been waiting for this moment since the day he'd recognized Copper's pregnancy. And now that it was finally happening, he felt a mixture of excitement and deep responsibility. This foal represented more than just valuable bloodlines. It was the culmination of Copper's recovery, the vindication of his dollar investment, and potentially the future of his breeding program. That by the time Marlene arrived, Copper had begun the more serious work of labor. She alternated between lying down and standing, her body instinctively finding the positions that would ease the foal's passage. Garrett and Marlene worked in comfortable silence, monitoring her progress while staying close enough to intervene. If complications arose, "Everything looks normal so far," Marlene whispered, checking Copper's vital signs, strong contractions, good positioning. "She's doing exactly what she should be doing." The hours passed slowly. Garrett found himself thinking about the chain of events that had led to this moment. The dismissive auctioneer, the skeptical neighbors, the gradual revelation of Copper's true identity, and now the imminent birth of what might be the most valuable foal ever born on his ranch. Dawn was breaking over the eastern hills when Copper finally entered the final stage of labor. She lay on her side, her powerful contractions working with increasing intensity to deliver the foal. Garrett could see the first signs of emergence, a small, dark shape beginning to appear. "Come on, girl," he murmured, his hand resting gently on Copper's neck. "You've got this." The foal arrived in a rush of fluid and movement, sliding into the world with the characteristic grace of healthy birth. Marlene immediately began her assessment while Garrett watched in awe. The newborn was a dark bay colt, his coat already showing the lustrous quality that marked superior breeding. "He's perfect," Marlene announced, her hands moving efficiently over the foal's body. "Strong heartbeat, clear airways, excellent muscle tone. This is as good as it gets." Copper lifted her head, nickering softly to her newborn son. The maternal instinct that had sustained her through months of difficult pregnancy now guided her through the crucial first moments of motherhood. She began the gentle licking that would clean and stimulate the foal, her actions speaking of ancient wisdom and unbreakable bonds. Within an hour, the colt was attempting to stand. His first efforts were unsteady, legs splaying in different directions, but his determination was evident. Garrett and Marlene watched from a respectful distance as he finally achieved vertical stability, then took his first tentative steps toward his mother. "Look at that movement," Marlene said softly. "Even at an hour old, you can see the quality in his action, the way he carries himself, the natural balance. This is exceptional." The colt's first nursing was successful, and Copper's mothering instincts were flawless. She guided him with gentle nudges, protected him from any perceived threats, and maintained the constant vigilance that would characterize the early weeks of his life. As the morning sun streamed through the barn windows, illuminating the stall, where mother and son were bonding, Garrett felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The mare who'd been discarded as worthless had given birth to a foal, whose bloodlines traced back to champions. The dollar he'd spent at that dismissive auction had yielded something beyond monetary value. It had preserved a genetic legacy that might otherwise have been lost forever. "What are you going to name him?" Marlene asked, packing her equipment after confirming that both mother and foal were healthy. Garrett studied the colt, already showing the alertness and curiosity that marked intelligent horses. "Promises legacy," he said finally. "He carries his mother's name and his father's bloodline." The name felt right, encompassing both the mare's journey from neglect to recovery and the foal's potential to carry forward the finest traditions of American horse breeding. As Marlene's truck disappeared down the driveway, Garrett remained in the stall, watching the miracle of new life unfold and planning the future that stretched ahead for both Copper and her remarkable son. Word of Promise's legacy spread through the horse breeding community with the speed of wildfire. Within a week of his birth, Garrett's phone was ringing constantly with calls from breeders, trainers, and investors who'd heard rumors about the Midnight's legacy colt born to a mare purchased for $1. The first official visitor was Harrison Blackstone, a respected bloodstock agent who'd driven 6 hours from Denver after hearing about the foal. Through industry contacts, his practice I took in Promise's legacy with the analytical precision of someone who'd evaluated thousands of horses over a 30-year career. "May I examine him?" Blackstone asked, his voice carrying the respectful tone reserved for truly exceptional animals. Garrett nodded, leading Copper and her week-old foal into the examination area. Promise's legacy had grown remarkably in just 7 days, his legs strengthening daily, his coat developing the lustrous quality that marked superior breeding. More importantly, his movement was becoming increasingly fluid, displaying the natural athleticism that his bloodlines promised. Blackstone's examination was thorough but gentle. He assessed the colt's conformation, checked the alignment of his legs, and observed his movement patterns as he followed his mother round the paddock. His expression grew increasingly impressed as the evaluation continued. "This is extraordinary," he finally admitted. "The bone structure, the muscle development, the natural balance, everything you'd expect from a cross between Autumn's Promise and Midnight's Legacy. But more than that, he's got presence. Even at this age, he commands attention." The validation was gratifying, but Garrett was unprepared for what came next. Blackstone produced a business card and a checkbook, his expression serious. "I represent a consortium of international investors," he explained. "We're prepared to make you an offer that would set you up for life. 7 figures, Mr. Thorne. Cash today." The offer was staggering, more money than Garrett had ever imagined possessing. But as he looked at Copper grazing peacefully nearby, her son nursing contentedly, he realized that some things couldn't be measured in dollars. "I appreciate the offer," he said carefully, "but Promise's legacy isn't for sale, not at any price." Blackstone wasn't surprised by the refusal. "I understand your attachment, but consider this. That foal represents genetic material that could benefit the entire breed. In the right hands, with the proper training and breeding program, he could sire champions for generations." The argument was compelling, but Garrett had already made his decision. He'll stay here, where his mother can watch him grow up, where he can develop naturally, without the pressure of being a commodity. Over the following weeks, the offers continued to arrive. Breeding syndicates, racing stables, and private collectors all sought to acquire Promise's legacy, each proposal more extravagant than the last. But Garrett remained steadfast in his refusal, much to the amazement of his neighbors and the frustration of potential buyers. The attention wasn't entirely commercial, however. Dr. Patricia Woodward, a genetics researcher from the University of Colorado, arrived to document Promise's legacy for a study on bloodline preservation. Her work would help ensure that the genetic legacy represented by the colt would be properly recorded and protected. "What you've done here is remarkable," she told Garrett during her visit. "Not just the rescue and breeding, but the decision to keep him. Too many exceptional horses are sold off to commercial interests before they can establish their own breeding programs." The scientific validation was deeply satisfying. Garrett had always believed that the best horses were created through patience, careful selection, and respect for natural processes. Promise's legacy represented the culmination of those principles, a living testament to the value of looking beyond surface appearances. As the colt grew stronger and more confident, his personality began to emerge. He was curious, but not reckless, spirited, but responsive to guidance. Most importantly, he showed the intelligence that marked truly exceptional horses, the ability to learn quickly, remember lessons, and form deep bonds with humans. The media attention was inevitable. Horse magazines sent photographers to document the miracle foal, and the story of the dollar horse who'd given birth to a champion captured the public imagination. But Garrett was careful to control the narrative, ensuring that the focus remained on Copper's recovery and the importance of proper horse care, rather than on the financial aspects of the story. "This isn't about money," he told a reporter from Quarter Horse Journal. "It's about recognizing potential where others see only problems. It's about giving animals the time and care they need to heal. And it's about preserving the bloodlines that make our breed special." The interview was picked up by national media outlets And soon Garrett found himself fielding calls from television producers and book publishers. But he remained focused on what mattered most, the day-to-day care of Copper and Promise's legacy, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing he'd made the right choice. As summer approached and the foal grew stronger, Garrett began planning for the future. Promise's legacy would eventually need specialized training, careful conditioning, and exposure to the wider world of horse showing and breeding. But for now, he was content to watch the colt explore his surroundings, learn from his mother, and develop the confidence that would serve him throughout his life. The dollar investment had become something far more valuable than money. It had become a legacy in the truest sense of the word. 5 years had passed since that rain-soaked April morning when Promise's legacy entered the world, and Copper Creek Ranch had been transformed into one of the most respected breeding operations in the region. The modest facilities had been expanded and modernized, but the essential character of the place remained unchanged, a haven where horses could develop naturally and form deep connections with their human caretakers. Promise's legacy had fulfilled every expectation and exceeded many more. Now a mature stallion standing 16 hands high, he possessed the perfect combination of power and elegance that marked truly exceptional horses. His dark bay coat gleamed with the luster of perfect health, and his movement displayed the fluid grace that had been apparent even in his first steps as a newborn. But it was his temperament that set him apart from other horses of his caliber. Where many stallions were difficult to handle, Promise's legacy remained gentle and responsive. He seemed to understand his importance to the breeding program, while maintaining the playful curiosity that had characterized his youth. Copper, now approaching her 20th year, had become the matriarch of the ranch. Her recovery from that initial state of neglect had been so complete that visitors often found it difficult to believe she was the same horse who'd been sold for $1. She'd produced 2 more foals in the intervening years, both sired by Promise's legacy, creating a small but exceptional bloodline that was already attracting attention from serious breeders. The ranch's reputation had grown steadily, built not on aggressive marketing, but on the consistent quality of the horses produced there. Garrett had remained true to his principles, refusing to rush young horses into training or breeding programs. Instead, he allowed them to develop at their own pace, ensuring that they reached their full potential both physically and mentally. Dr. Reeves had become a regular fixture at the ranch, her weekly visits evolving from medical necessity to friendship. She documented the entire journey, from Copper's initial rescue through Promise's legacy's development, creating a case study that was now used in veterinary schools to illustrate the importance of looking beyond surface symptoms. "You've created something special here," she told Garrett during one of their regular consultations. "Not just the horses, but the entire philosophy. People are starting to understand that the best breeding programs aren't about quick profits, they're about patience and respect for the animals." The financial success had followed naturally. While Garrett had never sold Promise's legacy despite increasingly extravagant offers, he'd carefully selected breeding partners for his stallion, creating a steady income stream that supported the ranch's operations and expansion. More importantly, he'd established a network of like-minded breeders who shared his commitment to ethical practices and long-term thinking. The ranch now employed 3 full-time staff members, including Melissa Cartwright, a young woman who'd arrived as an intern and stayed to become Garrett's assistant manager. She'd learned his methods through careful observation and practice, ensuring that the ranch's philosophy would continue even as he aged. The secret, Garrett often told visitors, isn't in the breeding or the training, it's in the patience. Too many people want immediate results, but the best horses, like the best people, develop slowly, with time and care. The lesson had resonated far beyond the horse breeding community. The story of the dollar horse had become a parable about recognizing hidden value, about the importance of second chances, and about the rewards that came to those who were willing to look beyond surface appearances. On a warm afternoon in late spring, Garrett stood in the main pasture watching Promise's legacy work with a group of young horses. The stallion had assumed a teaching role, using his natural authority to guide the youngsters through their social development. It was a perfect metaphor For the ranch itself experienced wisdom nurturing the next generation. Copper grazed nearby, her presence a constant reminder of the journey that had brought them all to this point. She'd recovered not just her health but her dignity, proving that with proper care and attention, even the most neglected animals could flourish. The phone in Garrett's pocket buzzed with another call from a potential buyer. Another 7-figure offer for Promise's legacy. He let it go to voicemail, knowing that no amount of money could purchase what they'd built together. The true value of the ranch wasn't measured in dollars, it was measured in the trust between human and horse, in the satisfaction of work done well, and in the legacy that would continue long after he was gone. As the sun set over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Garrett felt a deep sense of completeness. The dollar he'd spent at that auction had grown into something far more valuable than mere money. It had become a testament to the power of patience, the importance of looking beyond surface appearances, and the extraordinary things that could happen when someone was willing to see potential where others saw only problems. The sick horse who'd been sold for $1 had indeed been worth something no one else could see. Not just the valuable bloodlines she carried, but the capacity for recovery, the strength of spirit, and the promise of a future that would honor both her sacrifice and the man who'd recognized her true worth. Promise's legacy would carry that story forward, passing it on to future generations of horses and horsemen, ensuring that the lesson of Copper Creek Ranch would never be forgotten. Sometimes the most valuable things in life come disguised as problems, waiting for someone with the wisdom to see beyond the surface to the treasure that lies beneath.